He played the harp, yet he killed tens of thousands. We'll talk about this warrior king today on Zola Levitt Presents.
Welcome to Zola Levitt Presents. I'm David Hart.
I'm Kirsten Hart.
Jeffrey Seif.
Well, our program today, Warrior King, is very intense.
Yeah, warrior stuff.
Very
Right,
intense. Yes.
war. Maybe I should just let the two of you talk about
two guys
that.
getting at it,
Yeah.
the clash of titanic forces, the exposing oneself to risk, the dangers of human experience, and God bringing about great success.
I think we think about David, and this is a man after God's own heart, but he was intense. He was an intense warrior.
Yes, he was. And back in the day, men were trained for war. A lot of warriors back then, a lot of warriors today.
That's right. Right now, let's go to that battle with the Philistines and teaching from Dr. Seif.
It was a surprise attack, and the night belonged to David. In all the land of Israel, there was no one who could stand against God's anointed one. No sword or weapon devised by man could defeat us. And the Philistines fled into the night.
News crews don't come here much anymore, but I got news for you. Years ago, this place was the talk of the town. Got to be careful as I drive here now because we're reasonably high up and I don't want to just look at the camera. I need to look at the road. Behind me is the Valley of Elah, a place where David sparked a revolution, if you will. For the longest, Israelites were oppressed, suppressed, repressed, depressed, and impressed with the need that something needed to change. And why was that? Because the Philistine were working havoc over here. And not just the Philistines here, but different steens at different places. And people were afraid. They were ready for a change, if you will. Talk about we need change. Well, they really wanted it. They needed it. And the time was right. Someone needed to stand up with some faith and some biblical faith. A lot of people have a lot of ideas about what needs to happen in the world, but you know what? Finally, someone stood up with God's idea. And I love him for his so doing, and by virtue of his so doing, David left a mark on biblical literature, not only in his own day, but extended for 1,000 years later. It all started here. What a fitting place to tell the story of the needing to contend and war, if you will, for God's sake. For us, for the most part, the implications are spiritual more than material, but we need to recover that radical edge. And I want to talk to you about that edge as we look at the warrior king and we consider the need for David-like leadership in these Goliath-like times. Speaking of the cutting edge, reminded of a verse, a rather interesting verse in Scripture that might seem offensive somewhat at face value. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 54, says in Hebrew, "Vayikach David et rosh ha-Philishti," and David took the head of the Philistine, "Vayiviehu Yerushalayim," and he took the head to Jerusalem. Goes on to say then that he took Goliath's armor and he put it in his own tent. It seems to me that we're looking here at the warrior king. Well, he's not a warrior king at this juncture. He's a young man who opted to jump into the fray, who later became a king. because culture was looking for a man of faith who was going to stand up and lead, maybe risk a little bit in the process of so doing. Well, David certainly jumped into the fray. I'm sure it was unexpected, but all of a sudden he just found himself where the troubles of the day afforded him an opportunity to rise and be what God had called him to be. I don't know about you, but there's something about this imagery that really works for me. We live in a unisex world where gender boundaries are blurred. There are a number of things that are blurred in this upside-down world of ours now. But I'm looking here at a male who wants to believe God and stand up and be counted, and he wants to be heroic, if you will. I believe that we live in a world where heroism is in very high demand but very short supply. And when I look at David, I'm not only reminded of an image from his Philistine wars, I'm not only reminded of an image of what he was all about, but I see here an image of what we ought to be all about as men particularly, and people of faith generally, that is, stand up. Don't just accept the taunts of the enemy. So many people are beaten into submission and they despair and they pray up. They send their prayers heavenward, and I'm all for that, and I do that on more than one occasion. But what about stand-up guys? I believe that we need this David-like leadership today, men to stand up and be men as men to stand up and be men as husbands, men to stand up and be men as fathers, men to stand up and be men as pillars in their congregations, men to be men and stand up for their city, for their county, for their state, and for their country. I believe that we need biblical leadership that wants to make the world better by virtue of their participating in the drama. David, as a leader, invested his energies with the net result that Israel was better because of his plying his skill sets within the culture. And would that today people caught that vision. They wanted to lead. They wanted to make the world a better place, their family a better place, their congregations a better place, and culture on the whole. We need to pray up and stand up now more than ever. As we look at the world, let's look at it with biblical eyes and come to terms with the fact that we need David-like leadership for these Goliath-like times.
The Amalekites had just attacked southern Judah and destroyed Ziklag. All the worse, they had taken King David's wives, as well as the families of those who served him faithfully. Only God knew if they were still alive. It was a troubling time for the king. His men were angry. They wanted revenge. They wanted the death of their king. Yet David's strength remained in the Lord. The king summoned me, asking for the ephod. The ephod was a sacred linen garment that was worn by the priests on the most holy of occasions. On this troubling day, the king would call upon the Lord himself and directly appeal for divine intervention. He inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue the men who attacked? Shall I overtake them?" And the Lord replied, "Pursue them, for thou shalt surely overtake them."
Tour buses don't come here. Cars don't even get here. In fact, my 4x4, my off-road vehicle, couldn't even get here. And where's the here? We're at a place that I wasn't planning on taking you to. I wasn't planning on being here myself. I didn't know about this place a week ago. Came here to Israel to shoot a series called The Warrior King on David. Little did I know that in conjunction with our arrival and filming, we would have one of the greatest modern discoveries in the history of biblical archaeology. I know it sounds overstated, but it isn't. Articles are appearing on major Israeli periodicals, on the internet. Right here, the northeastern hills of Elah, in the ruins of Haifa, we have a fortress that dates back 1000 BC. Now, what makes this find striking, and I'm coming to you from the middle of it, what makes it striking is the fact that right here, very recently unearthed, were the oldest Hebrew scripts found to date, predating the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls by almost a millennia. And that's striking for a variety of reasons. And why is that? Because this was a fortress that dates back to the era of David. That's significant because we live in a world today where there are many revisionist sorts that are trying to rewrite history. Just as in America, oh, it wasn't really a Christian country originally. You know, they want to rewrite history in order to foist their agenda on modernity. Similarly, in Israel, there are individuals that are looking for a disconnect from biblical heritage. Well, there never was a King David, they say. Well, it was harder to say it when up north some years ago found was an inscription to the house of David right there, Tel Dan at the far north. And now here, in a fortress that dates back to David's day, we find Hebrew script. And this is interesting in part because the fact that there would be a Hebrew fort here, it's an extension fort. Arguably, there was a strong kingdom in Jerusalem, and this was an outpost here that was established not far from where the biblical story played out once upon a time when David went against Goliath. It's a great story. Biblical history is interesting, and we find that modern archaeology in various ways corroborates the biblical narrative, and what's happening here at this site argues to that effect. But my purpose here isn't to talk about biblical archaeology, fascinating as it is. I want to raise the story of David in part because we need to hear from him and learn from him today. I'd like you to turn in your Bibles, please, to 1 Samuel. There's an interesting story here when things weren't going David's way. It just so happens in life, sometimes culture turns against us, circumstance turns against us, and we find ourselves being pushed back. David was so disconcerted when he discovered that his town was overrun, his family was taken captive, everything was taken, in fact, and people were so mad at him as a leader, they were ready to stone him. We're told in the Hebrew Bible, chapter 30, verse 6, Vatetzer leDavid ma'od, and David was greatly distressed because of the defeats that he had experienced just then. And people, were told, were ready to stone him. Leadership is very precarious, just like standing here is precarious, to tell you the God's honest truth. Sometimes the winds blow for you, sometimes against you. David was on the downside of it all, but we're told here in the text, Vayit chazek David bar Adonai Elohav, and David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. For those of us that want to be good leaders, we have to fall back on our knees sometimes, because the truth of the matter is there are challenges. And what happened? David strengthened himself. He called for the priest to bring garments. He wanted to consult the Lord, actually, and we're told, just as we read down in verse 8, we're told, Vayishal David bar Adonai, and David inquired of the Lord. He had questions. He didn't know how to respond. And you know, we live in a world today where we can be beset by circumstances that don't seem to be going our way. We need to seek the Lord as well. The good news that if we do, if we seek Him, we'll find Him, and we'll find answers for vexing human dilemmas.
Our resource this week, the Grafted In package, which includes the series Called Together on 2 DVDs, a Grafted In necklace, 2 Stand With Israel koozies, a Grafted In decal, a Grafted In pin, Our Things to Come bookmark, and the Prophesied Messiah bookmark. Contact us and ask for the Grafted In package. And thank you for your support. If you're a longtime viewer of Zola Levitt Presents, then you're probably a longtime supporter. And I just want to say thank you, as you know how important your donations are to keep this ministry on the air. If you're a new viewer, I'd like to talk to you for just a moment. It's very important that you remember that the only way that we can stay on the air is through your donations of support. Please remember us monthly, and thank you.
We're not a ministry that constantly asks for your money, but your donations, and especially your faithful monthly donations, are greatly appreciated. We're able to do all of this because of you, our wonderful viewer. Now, let's go back to Israel.
The king would be gracious, we were told. He would hear our plea. And so it was that we were ushered into his golden chamber. We had marched in defiance against King David. Now here we were, fearing for our lives. 3 kings of neighboring nations bowing before him.
אדוני המלך, באנו לבקש את סליחתך ואת רחמך מעתה ועד עולם.
We never thought it would come to this, but better we should appeal for peace and serve him than die before his sword. The king accepted our plea, giving credit to his God.
עתה תדעו כי אני הוא מלככם, ואדוני אלוהי צבאות, הוא אלוהיכם.
How mighty this God of Israel must be.
There's lots of helicopters and jets flying around today, and I don't have enough clout to make them stop. We're 40 kilometers from the Gaza, and that's probably some reason why they're busy out and about doing what they're doing. And here we are doing what we're doing, visiting a famous site in antiquity, an outpost for David's forces right at the border with the Philistines. And it's interesting, by the way, that today there's problems with individuals that use the name Palestinian. And so it is that overhead individuals are maintaining vigilance in the skies. Just that from where I'm standing years ago, individuals maintain vigilance as well to fight off the prevailing darkness. And fight we must, by the way, and I mean that in the truest of senses, and that is that not all of us bear arms in defense of home and hearth, but anyone who names the name of the Lord is called to arm up, if you will, to put on a helmet, a shield, get out the sword of the Spirit. We're vested with the responsibility to contend, to stand for principles. And in the course of fighting, we should know that it doesn't always go our way. Sometimes, as David learned on more than one occasion, we need to strengthen ourselves in the Lord. And by the way, I think this is that sort of time. I'm reminded, by the way, when I read 2 Samuel chapter 10, David was involved in a battle royal. The end result was that the individuals came and did subservience to him. He got the better of it. And the kings came and bowed down and, peace at last. But before that, he had to contend. And in chapter 10, verse 12, we have Chazak v'nit Chazak. Be of good courage and let us be strong. Now, friends, that's a word for today. He says, be that, bi'ad amenu, be strong for our people. Uva'ad arei Eloheinu, and for the cities of our God. At 53 years of age now, I realize that I've lived a good part of my life. I'm not ready to stick myself in the grave, but I realize that the better part of it's in the rearview mirror. I plan to finish well. I feel in so many ways I'm not just fighting for myself as much as for my kids, as much as for future generations. I believe that God's people today, we need to be strong. We need to be serious. We need a revival. We need a renewal of energies and enthusiasms to do the Lord's bidding. It feels like the battle isn't going our way. And you know what? In ways it isn't. But, I've seen enough football games to realize that the winning team is at a loss at halftime, but it's not over until the bell rings at the end of the fourth quarter. I don't believe it's over for America, but I do believe that there are a number of challenges now. That said, when I read the Bible, I'm reminded of the fact that these guys always had struggles. And that's the bad news. The good news is, again, to hark back to Paul's word, thanks be to God who leads us in triumph. I would like your faith to be built up. I know mine needs built up as well. And here, coming from a fort, an outpost of David's empire 3,000 years ago, I want to encourage you in your faith. I believe that we need David-like leadership in Goliath-like times. Will you stand with me and be that man of God and that woman of God and help our culture return to its biblical moorings?
I'm sure you've heard the saying, you can't have a testimony without a test. Well, I know that I've had testing in my life, and now I have a testimony, and I know that David went through some testing in his life.
And frankly, who hasn't?
Right.
Whether it's you, or you, at the end of the day, I think sometimes in church we make it sound too easy. Just believe this doctrine, put money in this plate, come to this church, and everything's coming up roses. I think if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
And it's timing. I mean, it wasn't easy for David. I think of, he was anointed young, I think about 15 years of age. And if I were anointed, I kind of joke about this, if I were anointed as Queen of America, I'd be like, I'm ready. I mean, David knew he was going to be king, but it took a long time.
Yeah, but Israel didn't know it. You know how long the time was? 13 years. Talk about an unlucky number. Oh, 13 years on the run.
Right.
It's not easy, as per David's point. David had a testimony. He had a test. And I'm glad to see him getting some respect, these kings coming down and acknowledging him, but it was a long and winding road.
Personally, I don't know if I could have lasted that long. I don't know if I could have made it,
endured,
fought, and listened to the Lord speaking.
That long.
A lot of people get the lights punched out from underneath them. You probably know in life we suffer insults. I say if God's got a call on our lives, well, hell has an assignment against us, and it is not easy. It's indeed possible, probable, likely. Life can be checkered with trials. And like David, we need to reach down and find that within us that God has put there and reach up to Him and get the better of it. At the end of the day, we win. But I heard an old saying from mariners, God promised us a safe harbor, but not an easy voyage. And we're on the voyage right now.
And it's the journey, but he's finally getting a little bit of recognition for what he's done as a warrior, warrior king, future king.
Right, he's coming into his own. He still has his challenges. It's a pet peeve of mine, by the way. I think the males in this culture are kind of enculturated to drop that militant, that testosterone-driven, that warrior aspect that men need to go out there and compete to find the gold and the girl and the glory. Success in life, it takes a little bit of verve.
Right.
Success in life isn't easy. If it was, everyone would have it.
Right.
But the success in a godly life, too, it takes a little leaning into it.
Someone else that has leaned into it and is a warrior in his own right is our friend Chaim Malespin in Israel. Let's hear from him now.
Here at the magnificent World Heritage location, Masada, what history? What if we could take a time machine and go back to the times of the tragic fall of this Jewish fortress taken over by the Romans? Or go back in the time machine to the time of Joshua. You know what? We don't have to go back in time because we are living in the Bible. We are in fulfillment of the restoration promises that God prophesied hundreds, thousands of years ago. But to go back to this tragic moment is heart-wrenching. But I want to tell you how it was. The Romans said, we want to crush this Jewish rebellion. We want to wipe them off the face of the map. We want to change the name of Israel to Philistinia, which Hadrian did in 135 AD. What they did here, though, is they surrounded Vespasian's mighty legion. They were called Legion X, the 10th Legion. They had fought in the Battle of Actium. They had fought all over. They had taken Britannia. They had come here and said, we will crush the last remaining of the Jewish people. And they surrounded this place, couldn't take it for 2 years almost. The Jewish people held out and they said, we will live and we may die, but we will remain free. They ended up building a ramp behind, and with battering rams, volleys of flaming arrows, even catapults with heavy stones. These are war machines that were never used before until now. Broke through And the Jewish people said, we will die, a free people. And they ended up killing one another. The last person fell upon his own sword and died. But that wasn't the end of the Jewish people, was it? God's word, as he prophesied it all over the prophets, said they would return from the north, the south, the east, and the west. The desert would bloom once again. We would plant our vineyards. And Aliyah is what I did. And I do feel, as a soldier, as a master sergeant in the combat engineers, what we do is we actually march 90 kilometers, and to get our beret, to finish the grand finale of our training, we climb a mountain. Some units used to climb this mountain as well and get their beret and defend the defenseless here in the land of Israel. Let's stand together for restoration.
Sister Aretha Franklin saying that she couldn't get no respect. Took a while for King David to get it, and I'm glad to see him coming into his own. Next week, we'll follow that journey where David is in fact celebrated. It's not easy, but at least the world is recognizing the call of God on his life.
Right, and sometimes it takes forever. Go wait it out.
Celebration a little happier than maybe this week?
Yeah, a little more upbeat. It's nice to get the recognition that's due.
Right.
I mean, you got to earn it. It's called stolen honor if you want glory without going through the gory, but that's not the way we roll.
Right.
But that's next week. Thank you for going on the journey with us week after week. And as you go now, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter, is free and full of insightful articles and news commentary from a messianic perspective. Visit levitt.com to find our newsletter, along with current and past programs, our television schedule, and much more.
Don't forget to order this week's resource by calling 1-800-WONDERS, or you can purchase it from our store at levitt.com.
Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries help these organizations bless Israel.
Thanks again for joining us this week. Zola Levitt Ministries and this television program depend on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.
This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.